Hello friends, for today's video I wanted to go through a list of some adult fantasy book recommendations for the winter. A few things to note before we jump into it. I have done the same style of video in the past, and I wanted to ensure that the recommendations I give today are different from the recommendations I have given in the past. So if you are interested in more suggestions after today, I'll have that other video linked. And also in that other video is where you're going to see a lot of the ones that people consistently and repeatedly point to as quintessential winter recommendations. For example, things like Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik or Catherine Arden's The Bear and the Nightingale. Those are mentioned there. So I tried to find other ones that maybe don't get recommended as frequently. Second, I would love to know what are your fantasy recommendations for the winter, and I'm going to stick to adult fantasy, but feel free to mention books from other age ranges. That way, anybody that comes to this video doesn't just have my suggestions, but yours as well. Third, I want to articulate what I think of when I think of a winter book recommendation. First, and the very obvious thing, is that the environment plays a role and that there is something to do with the cold. That's a big part of it, of course. But I don't just restrict the idea of a winter book recommendation to whether there is a cold setting. I think there's something to also stories that are essentially the opposite of what you see for summer recommendations. I think a lot of times in the summer, those are books that are more fast-paced, action-packed, not always, of course, but I don't think when we think summer recommendations, we just think a desert setting or a hot setting. We also think about those ones that are more the equivalent of what a summer blockbuster would be in movie form, just as a book. So if I think of that aspect as well, and we kind of reverse it, winter recommendations for me oftentimes are books that feel like we're slowing down, we're getting lost in these worlds, we can really sink our teeth into these, and we can just have them play out in this almost storybook kind of way, or in a way that feels almost closer to historical fiction in a sense, because I do think there's something that feels a little bit more like the environment does play a very significant pivotal role in their lives, in their cultures, and that's something that I think that cold settings bring to life as well. So it's not just a matter of the cold, but also what's the purpose that it serves in the story, and then taking that purpose and finding it in other areas as well. I'll have all the books that I mentioned in the description bar down below in case you are interested in checking any of these out. But without further ado, let's actually jump into the recommendations. The first two that I wanted to recommend, one of them in particular especially, I feel like you can just take your time and get lost in, and then the other one just kind of feels like this classic fantasy story with just a little bit of a shift in how it's told to us because it's something familiar, but we get this voice that has beautiful writing delivering the story to us. So the two books would be Bloodsong and Lancelot. Lancelot obviously is the book that I'm referring to when I say a familiar story, just told a little bit different. Both of these stories do follow these young men from the time they're very, very young, and you're kind of watching them grow up, and you're just waiting for things to go wrong, and also you grow really close to them and really connected to them. I especially love Valen from Bloodsong. Valen kind of consistently remains a character that sets the bar pretty high for a lot of other characters, but what I described before about being able to just sink your teeth into it, get lost in it, it's not a story that invites you to rapidly turn the page because you just have to know what happens next. If anything, it's kind of the reverse. It invites you to slow down and to take your time with it and just lose yourself in it. And there's certainly something about Anthony Ryan's writing style that I think is very fantastic at accomplishing this, of things that almost feel borderline slice of life, but not slice of life in the cute way that we associate with cozy fantasy, but rather just sort of these pieces of this person's life in this exact moment is creating something very pivotal to their future, or it is something that it's transforming them, or it's showing their characterization. And the setup for Bloodsong, if you don't know, is that you follow this, as I said, this young boy from the time they are young, as they are within a certain school that is training them to become the most elite of soldiers. And I don't want to give the wrong impression when I say school. It's not a school setting necessarily. It's more just intense, rigorous training over and over and over again that at times can lead to some of these young boys dying. It's very, very intense, but you just kind of watch his life unfold and you just grow to care about him so, so much. But you also see the ways in which a young person's experiences do inform them as they grow into adulthood. And then Lancelot, I think that the writing is absolutely beautiful, and if you are looking for a version of something to do with the Arthurian tale, but you want it done in a way where it doesn't feel like everything is about transforming it, making it completely different, and you just kind of want a version of it, but something that feels really, really, really beautifully written. I definitely think that this story serves that exceptionally. Bloodsong had the word song in it, so it's a silly but perfect way to transition into talking about Gale Song. Specifically, the first book is called Children of Gods and Fighting Men. One of my favorite books I've picked up this year. I thought it was incredible. A phenomenal example of historical fiction fantasy done well. This story follows two main perspectives, both of whom are living in what is basically Ireland in the past. And we see one of them has certain powers that she has to keep hidden, and she's one of the last of her kind. And she is also extremely ruthless and will do anything she can to maintain her hold on power, because to her, power means security and safety, especially for her son. So she is very dangerous, very cutthroat. And then we have another perspective, and her people are somewhat responsible for the eliminating of the other characters' people. But they are very much kept within the shadows. They do seem to have magical abilities, and they're kind of witch-like. Sometimes they're more healer-like. But they insist that they stay out of the affairs of people, and that they just simply keep an eye on what's going on to have a sense of self-preservation, when in actuality they clearly are kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes when it comes to a lot of the politicking, of which there is a lot. So you have one character that is fully involved in the politicking, but they are keeping their identity a secret. Then you have another character that doesn't really want to be involved, and they want to live in isolation and away from everybody and all of these powerful people, but they are somewhat forced into trying to get information about some of the powerful players on the board. Really, really cannot articulate enough how exquisite this story is, how well it plays out. If you like historical fantasy, if you like fantasy that feels like it's based in a lot of lore, if you like really intense intrigue as well, this story fits it perfectly. On that note, I cannot say political fantasy without having to also mention The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison. The Goblin Emperor is extremely, extremely fantasy heavy. If you are somebody that gets a little bit lost in the fantasy names, it's a lot to keep track of, this book fully embraces that. However, I think it embraces it in a way so as to allow you to feel what the main character Maya is feeling. So the setup for this story is that you follow this society where it's more elven, and the goblins are not treated well. However, to establish a sense of power and connection to the goblins, you did see that the emperor, the ruler, ended up marrying a goblin woman and then had a child with her, and then pretty much cast her aside. You have our main character as the child of these two individuals. His mother died when he was young. He has pretty much been cast out from the rest of the court because they don't really want anything to do with him. His mother was just a political pawn, so he means basically nothing. However, he is technically the son of a powerful person, so he has to be kept in some form of luxury, but his life is basically a small prison. And his life changes when everybody in line for the throne before him is killed, and he is suddenly put on the throne. And not only is he facing the prejudice of the rest of the court because of his bloodline, not only does he have no idea if everything that wiped out the people before him, if that was intentional or an accident, but on top of all that, he has no experience ruling whatsoever. He's completely a fish out of water. And clearly there are sharks at every turn. Everybody is waiting for a way to use this young man, thinking he's going to be stupid and malleable, and they can get what they want out of him, and that he's going to be extremely ignorant about the ways of things. But he is not only so lovable and so rootable, but he is very intelligent. And there's the idea of typically power corrupts, and Maya is one of those characters where you're like, oh, but he cares. He cares about having integrity, and because of his background, he also is able to see when people are being mistreated or when certain things are contributing to unrest. He's able to see that from a different perspective than other people that came before him that held these positions. So he is just the most likable of main characters. And when I say that, I feel like all the intense fantasy names and the utilization of it almost feels like its own language within the story, because there's just so much to all the places and everything. I think the reason that is contributing to connecting you to the character is because he's a fish out of water, so then when you're put in the story, you also are trying to take in all this information at the same time. So it allows you to become closer to the character, I think. It's exceptional. I absolutely love it. And if you're a fan of political fantasy, this one is so good. After that, we have A River Enchanted, as well as its sequel, A Fire Endless. This is just a duology, so it's just 2 books and then you're done, which I think is great for the winter if you just kind of want to have a slower story, but you also want to be able to complete it at the same time in the season, then this one will serve that really well. This one really, truly does have aspects of the environment that play a pretty pivotal role in the story. I do think that Rebecca Ross's writing is beautiful, and it's beautiful also without being purple. I know for some people, purple prose, they genuinely really enjoy that, so I don't want to say that one is better than the other, but I do think it's difficult actually to accomplish really stunning, beautiful, evocative writing without leaning into purple territory, and I think she's fantastic at it. She just knows exactly how to describe things in a way that transports you to that time and place. And speaking of the setting of the story, you follow a young man who is tasked with returning to his home island, and he is a bard, and they want him to perform for these spirits because you can essentially summon the spirits through music, and they want him to do this so they can inquire about these children who have gone missing on this island. So there's a little bit of a mystery plotline to the story. There are certainly fantasy elements to the story. They have a lot of animosity between each other on this island, and you also see different kinds of relationships. So for example, you see sibling relationships develop, you see friendships that develop, and there's actually a relationship that is very different as far as in the romantic relationships. There's just a lot of different aspects of this one that I think are beautiful. That's kind of the word I continuously come back to. And the way also I would say over the course of the duology that everything with the lore is expanded upon, I really, really enjoyed all of that. And I think it gets a little bit more fantasy focused as the story progresses. From there, I wanted to give some recommendations that, if not just being classic fantasy, they have the feel of classic fantasy to some degree. So one of them is actually a classic fantasy, and then one of them is not. It's more modern, but taps into that nostalgia, I think. So the one that's actually classic fantasy would be Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Yes, many of you know this is not the story for me. I'm not the biggest fan of this trilogy. However, you cannot deny that this has that quintessential classic fantasy feel. It's got that kind of hero's journey, and it's got this very, very rich lore within the story. I've described it before as there's almost like horizontal versus vertical world building, where horizontal is like we expand into a lot of different countries, a lot of different places, a lot of different cultures, and then there's the vertical kind of world building where it feels like a lot of the events of the past, the stories that you've been told, and how they are different from one group of people to the next, all of that plays a role in what's transpiring in present day. So while you maybe aren't spanning across these various different places so enormously like you do in certain other epic fantasy stories, it still has that feeling of epicness to it, certainly. And then when it comes to Dragon Mage, oh my gosh, if you like dragon stories, there aren't too many dragon fantasy books that I feel like are better than this one. It's exceptional. It is fantastic. The 2 main perspectives also are exceptionally likable, and the story does a great job of having characters that feel very different from your typical protagonist. One of them is somebody who is neurodivergent. He very clearly thinks different from other people. He has a hard time connecting with other people, but he is so sweet and tender-hearted. And then his friend is very protective and absolutely just one of the best friends that you could ask for. And the 2 of them, it's one of those stories where I think in a lot of, especially a lot of fiction these days, we put so much emphasis on romantic relationships, and hey, a lot of us are down for a good love story. We just, obviously we care about the way that it's told and how the story plays out and all those things, but we don't see this kind of almost epic friendship as the center of the story or one of the very pivotal aspects of the story, and it's just basically perfect in the story. If you want a story that feels like classic fantasy, has dragons, has great lore, and has an amazing friendship at the center of it, you have to check out Dragon Mage. It's very, very good. As stated at the beginning, I would really, really love your recommendations as well. And also, even if you don't know, is this a good winter recommendation or not, if it even just has something that is similar in feeling to some of what I described, I'm all ears, because on a selfish note, a lot of these books are books that I really, really enjoy. So if you have any recommendations for, hey, if you like that, you'll probably like this as well, I am definitely listening. I'll have the video I did in the past in the description bar also, and in general, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.